There is a conversation that happens in every Amish household before a wedding. It happens behind closed doors. It happens in whispers. It happens between a mother and a daughter, or an aunt and a niece, or sometimes a grandmother who sits you down with her hands folded and her eyes somewhere far away. And she says the things that have been passed from woman to woman for generations. I was 17 years old when I had that conversation. I sat in my mother's kitchen on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks before my wedding day, and I listened. And what I heard changed me. Not in the way you might expect, not because it prepared me, but because of what it left out. Because of the things no woman in my community had ever said to another woman out loud. Because of the questions that had never been allowed to exist. I have carried those missing words for a long time. And today, I'm going to tell you what Amish brides are really told. And I'm going to tell you what we were never told. And by the end of this, I think you will understand something about silence that you did not understand before. Because silence is not empty. Silence is a shape. And the shape of the silence I grew up inside was exactly the shape of every truth they did not want us to know. Before we go any further, there is something I want to say from the heart. More than 90% of the people watching right now have not subscribed yet. And perhaps that would not matter so much if these stories were just words. But they are not. They are pieces of lives lived inside systems that did not ask permission. So if you have ever found yourself in one of these videos feeling understood, feeling seen, feeling like someone is finally saying the thing you could never say out loud, please subscribe. It is completely free, and it helps this community keep growing. And while you are here, tell me in the comments what brought you to this video today. What is the one question you were never allowed to ask? Now, let me take you back to that kitchen. My mother was a practical woman. She loved me by preparing me, by equipping me for the life that had already been decided for me, not by asking me what I wanted that life to look like. She set 2 cups of meadow tea on the table between us. She sat across from me with her hands flat on the wood. And she began. She told me that marriage was a covenant before God, the sacred agreement between a man, a woman, and the Lord, witnessed by the community and sealed in the eyes of the church. She said it was not to be taken lightly, not to be undone, and that every difficulty I would face inside of it was something God had permitted for my growth. I nodded. I had heard versions of this my entire life. Then she told me about submission. Not in those words exactly. Our women did not use that word the way preachers did from the pulpit. She said it softer. She said that a husband was the head of the home the way Christ was the head of the church. She said I would find peace in it once I stopped fighting it. She did not say I was fighting it. She said once, as if every young woman arrived at her wedding with some unnamed resistance that marriage was supposed to cure. And I sat there thinking, she knows. She knows I do not want this. And she is telling me that the wanting does not matter. She told me that my body belonged to my husband. She did not say it that plainly. She said it sideways, around the edges. She said that I should be willing. She said that a man had needs and that being a wife meant understanding those needs and not turning away from them. She said the word willing 3 times. And each time I understood more clearly what she was not saying, which is that my own wanting or not wanting was not part of the calculation. The word was willing, not choosing, willing. Like something you submitted to rather than something you participated in. She told me it would hurt the first time and that this was normal. She said it the way you tell someone the shot will sting. Matter of fact, brace yourself, it passes. She did not ask if I had questions. She did not leave space for questions. Then she told me to keep a clean house. This is the part that has stayed with me the longest. After the covenant and the submission and the willing and the pain, she told me to keep a clean house. She told me that how a wife kept her home was a reflection of her character and her love for her family. She told me to have a hot meal ready in the evening. She told me to learn Eli's preferences and remember them. She told me that the kitchen, the garden, the children, and the home were my domain, and that I should take pride in them. And then she poured more tea, and she asked me if I had any questions. I had so many questions I could not breathe. But none of the questions I had were questions I was allowed to ask. Not because she would have punished me, but because they did not exist inside the language we shared. I did not know how to ask whether I was allowed to feel desire rather than just willingness. I did not know how to ask whether my grief about this marriage was a spiritual failure or simply the truth. I did not know how to ask what happened to women who never learned to want the lives they had been given. So I asked nothing. And she squeezed my hand, and she said, "It will pass, Hannah." And I understood then that she had also sat at a table like this one, that someone had told her it would pass, that she had believed them, or chosen to believe them, because the alternative was too large to carry. I drank my tea, and 3 weeks later, I wore the blue dress. But here's the thing no one prepared me for. Here is the conversation that has never been on the list. No one told me what to do when the man you married was also frightened. No one told me that the system that had not asked my permission had also not asked his. No one told me that on the other side of the arrangement, there might be a young man who had also sat somewhere with his hands folded, while people older than him decided his future. No one told me that the stranger I was marrying was also a stranger to the life they were building for him. No one told me that the most important conversation of my marriage would not happen at the altar. It would happen at 10 o'clock at night in a small bedroom lit by a kerosene lamp, with my grandmother sleeping across the hall and 2 of his cousins below us, the walls too thin and the floors creaking. My new husband sitting beside me on the edge of a bed, while I cried in a way I had never cried before and could not stop. No one told me he would not be angry. I had been imagining for months what would happen if I broke inside that room. I had imagined fury. I had imagined consequences. I had imagined the look on my father's face if Eli came to him and said, "She is not willing." I had carried the fear of what honesty would cost me, and that fear had been bigger than everything, bigger than the grief and the wanting and the years stretching ahead. I had said yes because the cost of saying no was everything. I had worn the dress and made the vows and kept my voice from shaking because I had learned how to make my voice do what was required of it while my real self stood somewhere behind my eyes watching. And then I was in the room, and I was crying, and Eli said, "Are you all right?" Not in anger, not in impatience, with something in his voice that sounded, impossibly, like he already knew the answer and had been hoping someone would finally say it out loud. And I said the only true thing I had said in months. In Pennsylvania Dutch, because it was the only language my grief knew. I said, "I did not want this. I did not want to marry you. I did not want to marry anyone yet. They did not ask me. And I waited for everything to fall apart." He said, "I know." He said it quietly, in the dark, with the lamp burning low and the house full of sleeping people and the weight of a whole community pressing against the thin walls around us. He said, "I know, Hannah." They did not ask me either. And then he told me about Mary, the girl from his district he had wanted to court for almost 2 years. Her family had matched her with someone else first. His uncle was getting older and the farm needed a wife by spring, and he had done what was expected because it was the only thing the system made space for. He had cried alone in the barn the week the engagement was announced. He had watched my face during the ceremony and known, because the face of someone carrying something too heavy always looks exactly the same. He was 24 years old. He was scared. And in saying all of this out loud, he had done the thing no one had told either of us was allowed. He had been honest. In a system built on the performance of willingness, he had been honest. So we made an agreement. Not the one the community expected, a quiet one. No bishop, no congregation, no covenant before 280 people. We agreed that we would not be intimate that night. We agreed to lie down side by side under the quilt my grandmother had stitched, fully clothed, with space between us. We agreed to try, slowly, to become friends first. We agreed that if friendship grew, we would let the rest follow when it was ready, in our own time, in our own way. We agreed that what happened inside our bedroom was ours, not the community's. Ours. No one had told me this was possible. No one had told me that the thing I thought was going to break me was the same thing that might, if I was lucky, and if the stranger beside me was a particular kind of person, become the first real choice I had ever made. I lay awake most of that night. I listened to him breathe. I thought about my mother at her kitchen table telling me it would pass. I thought about the word willing and how it had sat in my chest like a stone. And lying there in the dark, I felt something I had not expected. Not love, too early for love. Something quieter and more durable. The first edge of trust. We stayed married for almost 6 years before I left the community. During those years, something grew between us I am still not sure how to name. Not passion, not the swept-away feeling, but real. We became friends, partners. He learned I needed an hour alone in the garden each morning. I learned he was grieving Mary and frightened of his uncle. We talked in the evenings about things our parents had never talked about with each other. We were intimate eventually, but only months later, on a night that felt like ours. A night we chose. My friend Rebecca, who had married the same year, told me once while we were canning peaches that she still could not stand the smell of her husband's hair oil after 4 years. She said it the way you'd mention the weather. I held her hand and said nothing. She did not have an Eli. Most girls did not. What I had stumbled into was rare. We had stolen it from the system, in whispers, in a lamp-lit room, while everyone slept. When I finally left at 23, Eli was the one who drove me to the bus station in the dark. He cried when he hugged me goodbye. I cried too. The shunning that followed, the closed doors of my parents and siblings, I have talked about in other videos. But Eli never fully shunned me. Twice a year, a card would arrive with no return address, just my name in his careful handwriting. He died 3 years ago in a farming accident. I learned from an English neighbor who found my number. I cried for a week. Not because I had been in love with him the way the English mean love, but because he had been the only person in that entire world who had ever asked me how I actually felt and then waited for the real answer. In therapy, I learned a phrase I had never heard before: coercive consent. It means consent that is technically given but cannot be meaningfully refused because the cost of refusal is everything. My yes at 17 was coercive. My vows before those 280 people were coercive. The bed I was placed in that night was coercive. None of it would have held up to a single honest question. And yet all of it was sanctified by my community as the will of God. What my mother told me was not malicious. She was not a villain. She was a woman who had been told the same things by her own mother in her own kitchen. She was passing on what had been given to her because it was the only thing she knew how to give. The cruelty was not in her. The cruelty was in the system, in the silence the system required, in the shape of everything that was never allowed to be said. What Amish brides are told before their wedding night is this: submit, be willing, keep the house clean. It will pass. What Amish brides are never told is this: you are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to speak the truth in a dark room to a frightened young man and find, against all expectation, that he is speaking it too. You are allowed to build something real out of something that was never supposed to be real. You are allowed to want. That voice inside you that whispered, "I did not want this." That voice was not sin. It was not weakness. It was the truest thing in the room. The truest thing in every room you have ever sat in, with your hands folded, while your real self stood behind your eyes, waiting for someone to finally ask. If you grew up where your future was decided in conversations you were not invited to, I see you. If you ever lay beside a stranger you had promised your life to and wondered whether anyone would ask how you really felt, I see you. You were not weak for crying. You were not faithless for wanting more. And the fact that you carried it is its own kind of strength. The quiet agreement Eli and I made in that lamplit room, with no permission and no map, was the most honest thing either of us had done. And honesty, even when it arrives late, even in the dark, is always the beginning of something real. The life that was chosen for you is not the only life you are allowed to want. Before you go, I want to thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. I know there are so many places you could have been today, and you chose to spend this time here with this story. But I want to be honest with you about something. More than 90% of the people who watch these videos still have not subscribed. And every time I see that, I wonder how many people are listening in silence, carrying something they have never said out loud, not knowing they have already found a place that will not turn away from it. If this story moved something in you, if it named something you thought had no name, please subscribe to Hannah the Amish Girl, like this video, and turn on the notification bell. There is so much more I have not said yet. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you were told about marriage or love or what you were supposed to want that you now know was not the whole truth? I will read every word.